Let's roll, man. Street smart, baby. Till we depart. Dapper Don Tom, internet icon.
A lot of people call it dark. A lot of people call it horrorcore, devil worship. I've heard it all. I never really looked at it like that, you know what I'm saying? But I know other people did. But to me, it was more like just reality rap.
Crazy. And then in 2000, you ended up getting locked up for a little bit.
Yeah. And oh, that was an ugly time, man. And it wasn't just one time. I was in and out like a revolving door.
If you've listened to Beyonce's Renaissance and hit that opening track, I'm That Girl, then you've already tapped into the raw, deep-cut DNA of early Memphis music. That hypnotic underground vibe traces straight back to one of its most influential architects, Tommy Wright III.
I didn't know Beyonce would want to work with me. I didn't know some of these things would happen.
But Tommy's journey isn't some simple rise to glory. It's a wild roller coaster. He went from being arrested 13 times before turning 18 to becoming one of the earliest pioneers of horrorcore to losing everything, only for his sound to come full circle and explode into the mainstream through one of the biggest artists in the world. Let's dive in. The beginnings. The environment that shaped Tommy Wright Jr. was the Whitehaven area of South Memphis, a neighborhood locals often call Black Haven. He was born on May 6, 1976 into a world that already carried a lot of pressure. His parents, Irma Lewis Ivy and Tommy Wright Jr., were both deaf, but they still found their own way to stay close to music. In church, they performed in the choir using sign language, expressing rhythm through hand movements and emotion instead of sound. Their lives show that creativity doesn't always follow the usual path. But whatever calm existed in his early childhood didn't last long. The family had to relocate to Whitehaven after his mother witnessed the violent murder of his aunt. That kind of event doesn't just disturb a home, it changes the entire atmosphere. For Tommy, it meant growing up in a neighborhood where danger was always close and trouble was never far away. The streets around him were filled with crime, and he got pulled into that world very early. Through his music, he later said that he had been arrested 13 times before turning 18. The charges covered everything from small offenses to drug and weapon-related issues. Eventually, the state stepped in. After too many run-ins with the law, Tommy was removed from his mother's care and placed under the state of Tennessee. From then on, his life moved from one institution to another. He went to 2 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 5 high schools, and even spent time in a boot camp program. From the outside, his upbringing looked chaotic and unstable. But inside all that disorder, there was something surprising. His teachers noticed that Tommy wasn't just another troubled kid. He was smart, observant, and able to write with real talent. Several teachers encouraged him to focus on writing instead of drifting deeper into the street lifestyle. And he listened. He joined the drama club, he got involved in the student council, he played in the marching band. These activities gave him rare moments of stability, places where he could slow down, think, and learn how to express himself. Without knowing it yet, he was training the same storytelling skills he would later use in his music. His earliest recordings came directly from the world he grew up in. Memphis had a unique sound, dark, heavy, underground, and full of raw street energy. Bootleg tapes from local legends like DJ Spanish Fly were everywhere, and they shaped the direction Tommy wanted to go.
What was inspiring you at that time to make the music that you were making?
Man, everybody was local. It was like DJs. Those DJs are so important, and they were important for me and my youth.
Around 1991, he recorded a small project called Still Not Quite Human. The cover said everything. It showed a black and white silhouette of him being arrested. It reflected his real life at the time. By 1992, he was 16 and ready to take a real step into music. That year, he created his first official album, Memphis Massacre, and he did it in a way that showed exactly who he was. He didn't have money, so he smashed open his piggy bank and used the coins he had saved, nickels, dimes, quarters, everything, to pay for studio time. The producers laughed when he poured the coins out, but he was serious. He recorded all 8 songs in a single day.
I went in there with like a piggy bank with full of pennies, and I was like, y'all gotta, you know what I'm saying, try to help me, you know what I'm saying, make a real tape, and I gave them the pennies. They laughed, but they helped me.
When the tapes were finally made, he handled distribution on his own too. No stores, no radio stations, no label. Just him walking through his high school with a backpack full of cassettes, selling them directly to other students. It was a real hustle built from nothing but determination, confidence, and the reality of the neighborhood he came from. The Memphis Massacre became the foundation of everything that followed. It showed his raw talent, his fearless work ethic, and his commitment to telling the truth about the world he knew. It was the first step in a journey that would eventually make him one of the most important underground voices to ever come out of Memphis. The Lo-Fi Architect. Tommy Wright III grew up learning one lesson very early. When you don't have much to work with, you learn how to flip what you do have. That mindset shaped not only his sound, but the entire Memphis underground scene that would later influence producers and rappers across the world. By the time he hit the mid-90s, the lack of money became his trademark. Wright, still a teenager, found out that limited tools force real creativity, and that idea became the backbone of the Memphis lo-fi style. Around 1994, he took things seriously and launched his own label, Street Smart Records. Now, this wasn't some official office with desks, filing cabinets, or a studio with fancy gear. Street Smart was literally a bedroom operation inside his Whitehaven house. Wright didn't just wear multiple hats, he wore all of them at once. He acted as the CEO, the producer, the recording engineer, the manager, the A&R, and the person who duplicated the tapes.
I had no idea. I was, just really going hard, straight out the house, making music, putting equipment together.
And he didn't wait on distributors. He hit the streets, selling tapes through hustlers, street teams, mom-and-pop shops, and car stereo spots. It was entrepreneurship at its purest, long before the term DIY artist became common. Because of this setup, the music naturally came out raw and lo-fi, but here's the twist. The lo-fi wasn't a flaw, it became the style. Wright leaned heavily on cheap equipment, especially his 4-track cassette recorder. That machine couldn't hide any imperfections. It added hiss, distortion, and that gritty texture that would later define the Memphis sound. Instead of trying to avoid the noise, Wright embraced it. He treated the roughness like an artistic choice. What most people would call low quality, he used as an identity. And this wasn't accidental, it was methodical. He knew he could turn those limitations into a signature vibe. In doing this, Wright accidentally created the blueprint for what people decades later would call bedroom producer culture. Long before SoundCloud rappers were making hits from laptops, Tommy Wright III showed that professional studios weren't required to create music that hit hard, traveled far, and influenced entire generations. His tapes became proof that authenticity didn't need polish. At the center of his sound was one machine, the Boss DR660 drum machine. This was not a hip-hop producer's dream gear. It was a cheap rhythm tool mostly made for rock guitarists to practice with. But its 12-bit resolution and weirdly low sampling rate, 26.04 kHz, gave it a dusty, gritty warmth that you won't hear on modern equipment. The DR660 didn't even come with a proper melodic engine, so Wright had to get creative. He'd take percussion samples and twist them into melodies. One of his trademark moves was turning the synth bass patch into long, rumbling bass notes that made the speakers shake.
What kind of equipment was that back then?
That was the 4-track. The 4-track.
The little Tascam.
Yeah, Tascam 5 sticks. We used the 4 tracks. We used the little samplers, Bosses, DR5s, DR660s, and little speakers. We had house speakers, and when I took it home, it never left.
And then came his most famous trick, pitching up the DR660's 808 cowbells. Instead of using them as percussion, he turned them into eerie, icy melodic lines. Tracks like Meet Yo Maker show this perfectly. The moment those high-pitched cowbells hit, you instantly know you're listening to Memphis. That exact formula, the lo-fi drums, the hypnotic bass, the warped cowbells, became the foundation of a global genre now known as funk. Producers in Russia, Brazil, Europe, and the US would recreate this sound decades later, often without knowing that Tommy Wright III had invented it on cheap equipment in a bedroom in South Memphis. The Memphis Horrorcore claim. But Wright wasn't just shaping sound. His music carried some of the darkest storytelling in rap. Because of that, he's often grouped with horrorcore pioneers. But his approach stood out from everyone else in the genre. The horror in his music wasn't theatrical, exaggerated, or supernatural. It wasn't about about demons, curses, or cinematic gore. His horror was grounded in the streets, paranoia, robberies, the threat of violence, the harsh reality of poverty, and the cold choices that survival demanded.
A lot of people call it dark, a lot of people call it horrorcore, devil worship. I've heard it all. I never really looked at it like that, you know what I'm saying? But I know other people did, but to me it was more like just reality rap.
To understand how unique Wright was, you have to look at the other major names in horrorcore at the time. In Detroit, Esham was pushing what he called acid rap, using wild imagery, witches, supernatural hauntings, dark spiritual metaphors to express chaos and inner turmoil. When Esham formed Natus, the group doubled down on these themes, mixing street talk with spiritual dread, creating an almost mythological style.
Acid rap, it's the venom, it's the spit, it's modern day blues. It's the venom that once it gets inside of you, it takes over your bloodstream.
On the East Coast, the Gravediggers, featuring heavyweights like RZA and Prince Paul, dropped 6 Feet Deep in 1994. They used horror concepts almost like satire. Their songs often felt like dark comedy mixed with gothic imagery. Tracks like 1-800 poked at taboo topics with shock value and theatrical flair, with lines like, "So you wanna die, commit suicide, dial 1-800-cyanide line, far as life, yo, it ain't worth it, put a rope around your neck and jerk it, the trick didn't work, your life was effed up from the first day of birth." The Flatliners from New York were in the same lane. They made outright shock rap, created for maximum reaction. Songs like Satanic Verses and Graveyard Nightmare felt more like horror movies than street reports. Out west, Sacramento's Brother Lynch Hung took things in a different direction, pushing violent, graphic storytelling to extremes, almost cinematic in detail, like you were watching an R-rated film through audio alone.
It's got a whole cannibal theme going on with it. So you're saying that if someone cooked up some human flesh for you, you would try it out?
Most definitely, with some seasoning salt.
And then you had Houston's Ghetto Boys, one of the earliest Southern acts to push horror themes. Their content was so intense that record labels tried to block distribution. Their music wasn't just violent, it was chaotic, terrifying, and sometimes deeply personal. Bushwick Bill shooting himself in the eye during a drug-fueled argument and then turning the hospital photo into the We Can't Be Stopped album cover shows how extreme their world was. Their shock value became part of their brand. But Tommy Wright III existed in a different lane. While others leaned into the theatrical, the mythological, or the exaggerated, Wright was documenting real life. His lyrics weren't based on fantasy or exaggerated characters. They were rooted in the daily experiences of Memphis street life, the crime, the fear, the loyalty, the desperation, and the deep, constant tension that came with being young and broke in a violent environment. His horror came from real consequences.
When I was recording, you know, I was just talking about stuff that actually was going on. I was right down the street when Reginald shot himself. I remember when Greg's little brother got because the other dudes wanted to make him pay a ransom just to get his brother back. I was right there.
10 Wanted Men. By 1993, Tommy Wright III was no longer just the kid selling tapes hand to hand around Memphis. He had figured out his formula, figured out his sound, and now he wanted to build something bigger than himself. That's when he formed 10 Wanted Men, or TWM, a loose but powerful collective of young Memphis talent who all came from the same streets, the same struggles, and the same hunger for a way out. What started as a one-man hustle quickly evolved into the beating heart of Street Smart Records, a full-on underground institution. TWM wasn't a fixed group with clean-cut membership lines. People drifted in and out, but there was always a core. This included names like C9, Lil Ramsey, Mac T-Dog, Project Pimped, Womack to Omen, and the women who would go on to become legends in their own right, LaChat and Princess Loco. Under Wright's leadership, TWM functioned like a creative boot camp. If you joined, you were expected to record hard, rap harder, and keep up with the raw Memphis style he was shaping.
Cats in Memphis listening to Spice One, is that kind of what inspired Memphis cats to rap fast?
Man, it gotta be.
That's amazing to me.
It gotta be because you know, Spice was hard to me.
And it was a few other, it was a lot of other guys.
Their group albums, especially Wanted Dead or Alive 1995 and 10 Toes Down 1997, capture this energy. These projects were chaotic on purpose, built from stacked vocal layers, fast-paced deliveries, and bare-bones pounding drums. There was nothing polished or neat about the sound. It felt like a street cipher that someone recorded through a broken microphone, but the rawness was part of the appeal. Wright's production kept things minimal, letting the vocal aggression be the centerpiece. One of the biggest steps Wright took during this era was signing Princess Loco, whose real name was Andrea Summers. He often talked about her as the first girl that I produced, and he meant that in a very real way. In an era where female rappers were usually either sidelined or sensualized, Wright treated Loco as a full equal. He made it clear that the women on his label weren't there as accessories. They were there because they could rap just as hard, if not harder, than the men.
And Princess Loco was in the group too.
Oh, Princess Loco.
I feel like
yeah.
you're very ahead of your time having two women in your group. Because like in
Man.
'92, like who was doing that?
Princess Loco, man.
She tight.
She was tight, young. We didn't know it, but I met Loco when we were like 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Her family members stayed right across the street from me.
And Princess Loco wasn't just good, she was the standout. Her style was instantly recognizable, that fast double-time flow that punched the beat like she had something to prove every single bar. But what really made her special was the way she painted the world around her. Her lyrics weren't exaggerated or cartoonish, they were about the real dangers she had to dodge daily. Cops watching her every move, jealous neighbors ready to poison her shine, or predatory dudes mistaking her toughness for vulnerability. She rapped with a cold clarity that came from living through what she talked about. On Gangsta B, she summed up her whole worldview with one line: "Society don't give a F about me, so I pack a gun." Wright later revealed that some of her most intense verses were recorded in the most ordinary settings. On the track Comin' for 94, he remembered recording her vocals at her family's kitchen table, using nothing but a 4-track cassette recorder at an age when most kids were barely starting high school. She was only 14 or 15.
I used to bring the 4-track to her house. And actually, like, you know, her mom didn't let her come to the studio. She was like, no. Coming for 9-4, we did it at the kitchen. And she held that, man, like 14, 15, because I'm older than Logo.
Right.
So, you know what I'm saying? And man, sounded like a man, a veteran.
As TWM grew stronger, Wright's pride in Memphis grew with him, and that pride was intense, defensive, and always ready for smoke. So when Bone Thugs and Harmony, the Cleveland group blowing up in the mid-90s, allegedly dismissed Memphis rap as low quality or unpolished, Wright took it personally. To him, it was a disrespect to the entire city, the entire movement he was building. He went straight to the mic. In 1996, he released Thuggish Ruggish Bustas on his album On the Run, a direct diss toward Bone Thugs. The track challenged their originality, their toughness, and their understanding of the streets. It stamped Wright as someone who could protect Memphis rap at all costs. Collapse, Incarceration, and Vindication. The DIY empire that Tommy Wright III built out of a small bedroom in Whitehaven eventually grew bigger than the underground systems holding it up. What started as a one-man operation had turned into a full-blown movement, and by the late 90s, Wright was ready to take things to the next level. He wanted Street Smart Records to compete on the same playing field as acts like 3 6 Mafia, who were breaking out of Memphis and gaining national attention. To scale up, he signed a distribution deal with Select O Hits, one of the major players in the region. At first, the partnership looked like a chance for Wright to streamline the business side of things and free up his energy for creating music. He poured his earnings into upgrading his operations, buying real studio equipment, improving his recording space, even purchasing refrigerators and warehouse storage. It was the first time he was trying to build something that felt like a real label instead of a homemade factory. But the expansion turned out to be the beginning of the end for the original Street Smart era. Wright has claimed that things with Selecto Hits went downhill fast. The relationship deteriorated dramatically, as he put it. He accused the distributor of withholding money, which threw his entire operation into financial chaos.
What really kind of led to that is like all that the label was doing with the money.
The very resources he'd invested so much into collapsed with the business. What was supposed to be a step forward ended up forcing him several steps back. By around 2001, the situation had escalated into a legal fight that marked the official conclusion of Street Smart Records as it had existed throughout the 90s. But the professional collapse wasn't the only storm hitting right at the time. Just as the label was falling apart, his own life took a harsh turn. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, his sentence starting around 2000 and lasting until his parole in 2005.
Crazy. And then in 2000, you ended up being locked up for a little bit.
Yeah,
What happened with that?
man. Oh, that was an ugly time, man. And it wasn't just one time. I was in and out like a revolving door.
With his reputation, his label infrastructure, and his freedom all collapsing at the same time, it could have easily been the end of Tommy Wright III's story. Instead, something strange happened. Even though he was locked up, his music didn't disappear. In fact, it took on a new life. The tapes he used to sell for just a few dollars on the street suddenly became rare collector's items. Fans, old and new, were hunting them down online, paying outrageous sums to get their hands on anything from the original Street Smart era. What was once a local underground sound had quietly grown into a cult movement. Even during his silence and low visibility throughout the 2000s, Wright maintained a loyal following. They were passing around old tapes, sampling his work, and keeping his legacy alive in small but steady ways. Before his collapse, Wright had managed to release one last major project, Behind Closed Doors, the soundtrack in 2001. This album showed exactly where his head was artistically. It wasn't just a collection of songs, it was built to accompany a documentary film. Wright wasn't chasing shock value like some of his horrorcore peers. He focused on real life without hiding behind metaphors or supernatural imagery. His horror wasn't fantasy, it was the world he lived in.
Some of the stuff that may seem ill to a lot of other people, it was just what was really going on. You listening to a real life. When I go in that studio, when I go in that booth.
That commitment to realism, along with a signature produced style, would turn out to be far more influential than anyone expected. As the 2010s rolled in, a new global sound began emerging: funk, trap, and a wave of internet-based underground scenes. Producers from all over the world began imitating the exact sonic textures Wright had created decades earlier. The gritty lo-fi quality, the pitched 808 cowbells, the hypnotic bass lines, and the drum programming that came straight from the Boss DR660. Producers began releasing sample kits based on the Memphis sound. Software companies designed plugins specifically to imitate the distortion and tape hiss of 90s cassette recorders, the same flaws Wright was once forced to work with. What had once been a limitation became a universal aesthetic. Then came the moment that erased any doubt about Wright's influence. In 2022, Beyoncé released Renaissance, and the very first song on that album, I'm That Girl, sampled Tommy Wright III's 1995 track Still Pimpin', featuring Princess Loco. Within seconds of the album starting, the world was listening to Loco's voice and Wright's early Memphis sound. Millions of listeners who had never heard of Street Smart Records were suddenly introduced to its legacy. For Wright, it was vindication. His entire philosophy had somehow survived decades, crossed continents, and entered mainstream pop culture through one of the biggest artists on earth.
I didn't know Beyonce would want to work with me. I didn't know some of these things would happen. It's a testament to all the work I put in, and I really put in a lot of work.
His empire had collapsed. He went to prison. His label folded, but the sound he created, the one born inside that tiny White Haven bedroom, lived on long enough for the world to catch up.